At a billionaire's gala, a white heiress publicly humiliated a black waitress in front of hundreds of guests. She poured wine on the woman called security and mocked her poverty for entertainment. When the trembling woman whispered, "I am your mother," the entire room erupted in laughter. No one believed her, not even the girl herself, who dismissed the claim with pure contempt. Can the truth be erased simply because of the color of someone's skin? The Hamilton estate blazed with light on that September evening. Crystal chandeliers cast their glow across marble floors, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. 300 guests filled the grand ballroom, each one dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits, champagne flutes catching the light as they moved through the crowd. This was Brittany Hamilton's 25th birthday celebration, and everything had been arranged to perfection. Natalie entered through the service entrance at the back of the mansion, her black uniform pressed and clean, her silver necklace tucked carefully beneath her collar. She was 55 years old, her dark skin showing the lines of a life lived in quiet struggle, her hands rough from decades of work. The catering company had hired her just 3 days ago as temporary staff for the gala. They didn't know why she had applied specifically for this job. They didn't know that she had waited 25 years for this night. She had followed Brittany's life from a distance all these years. Every magazine cover, every society page, mention every social media post. She knew that Brittany had graduated from Yale, that she preferred white roses over red, that she laughed with her head tilted slightly to the left. Natalie knew these things the way only a mother could know them, even a mother who had been erased from her daughter's history. The event manager gathered the temporary staff in the kitchen, assigning positions. Natalie requested the VIP section. Her voice remained steady even as her heart pounded against her ribs. In the ballroom, Brittany Hamilton stood at the center of attention, exactly where she belonged. She wore a cream-colored gown that complemented her light olive skin, her dark curly hair straightened and styled into elegant waves. At 25, she had already been featured in Forbes as one of the most promising young philanthropists in the country. She smiled at guests, accepted compliments, and played her role with practiced ease. But beneath the confidence, something else lived inside Brittany. A question she had carried since childhood, one she had learned never to ask aloud. Why did she look different from her father? Why did her hair fight against every straightening treatment? Why did she tan so quickly in summer, while Richard Hamilton remained pale as paper? These thoughts surfaced sometimes late at night, and she pushed them down every single time. Richard Hamilton stood near the entrance greeting guests as they arrived. At 60 years old, he commanded respect without effort. His real estate empire spanned 12 states, and his name appeared on buildings across the country. When the event manager brought the catering staff through for a brief introduction, Richard's eyes moved across their faces with the disinterest of a man who rarely noticed those who served him. Then his gaze landed on Natalie. For one fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Fear. His hand tightened around his champagne glass knuckles, going white, but he said nothing. He simply turned away faster than necessary and resumed his conversation with a senator's wife. Natalie noticed. She had expected him to remember. Across the room, another woman observed the brief exchange. Eleanor Wright was 65 years old, a retired obstetrician who now served on the board of a charity foundation that the Hamilton family funded generously. She had delivered hundreds of babies throughout her career, but certain nights stayed with her more than others. Certain faces she could never forget. When Eleanor's eyes fell on Natalie, she found herself staring at the older woman's neckline, where a thin silver chain disappeared beneath the uniform collar. Something about it tugged at her memory, a thread she couldn't quite grasp. Then a donor pulled her into conversation, and the moment passed. Natalie carried her tray through the VIP section, moving between clusters of wealthy guests, invisible in the way that service workers often become invisible to those they serve. She kept her eyes on Brittany, watching her daughter laugh at a joke, touch a friend's arm, toss her straightened hair over one shoulder. 25 years ago, Natalie had held a newborn baby in a hospital room, had counted 10 tiny fingers, and 10 tiny toes had whispered a name into that small, perfect ear before anyone else could speak. Bella. It meant beautiful. 4 minutes and 23 seconds. That was how long she had been allowed to hold her daughter before they took her away. Brittany moved toward the photographer's corner with a group of friends positioning themselves for pictures. Natalie stood nearby collecting empty glasses, unable to look away. Then Brittany stepped backward to adjust her pose, and her heel caught the edge of Natalie's tray. Glasses rattled. Brittany spun around, her expression shifting from surprise to annoyance in an instant. "Watch where you're standing," Brittany said, her voice sharp. "Can't you see we're taking photos?" Natalie lowered her head immediately. "I'm sorry, miss. I'll move." But her hands were trembling. This was the first time in 25 years that she had heard her daughter's voice from inches away rather than through a screen. It cut through her chest like a blade. One of Brittany's friends, a blonde woman in a red dress, laughed dismissively. "Honestly, the help these days. No training whatsoever." Brittany looked Natalie up and down, taking in the worn uniform, the rough hands, the bowed head. Something about the older woman's posture irritated her. It seemed too humble, too present, as if she wanted to be noticed despite her lowered eyes. "People like you should know how to keep your distance," Brittany said loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "This isn't your world. Try to remember that." The words hit Natalie like physical blows, but she didn't flinch. She had prepared herself for this possibility. She had known that her daughter might not be kind, might not be gentle, might have grown into someone shaped by privilege and isolation. She had hoped otherwise, but she had prepared. As Natalie stepped back, a familiar scent reached her. Jasmine and sandalwood. Brittany's perfume. 25 years ago, when Natalie had worked in this very mansion as a housekeeper, she had saved her first real paycheck to buy a bottle of perfume. She had planned to give it to her daughter someday when the girl was old enough to wear it. That bottle still sat unopened in Natalie's apartment, waiting for a day that never came. Now her daughter wore the same scent, and Natalie had to grip her tray to keep from falling. The photography session continued. Natalie retreated to the edge of the room, collecting herself, breathing slowly. She could leave now. She could walk out the service entrance and disappear back into her quiet life, having seen her daughter one more time. That could be enough. But then Brittany raised her champagne glass, gathering her friends close for a toast. 25 years, Brittany announced, her voice carrying across the nearby crowd. "I wish my mother could be here to see this. She would have been so proud." Natalie's chest seized. Brittany continued, her tone softening with practiced emotion. "My mother was the most elegant woman I never got to know. She died when I was only 2, but I carry her with me every day. To Margaret Hamilton, the perfect mother I lost too soon." The friends raised their glasses. "To Margaret." Natalie stood frozen, tray in hand, as the group drank to the memory of a woman who had never existed. Margaret Hamilton, the fictional mother they had invented to replace her. The lie they had built to erase every trace of Natalie from her daughter's life. She tried to hold it in. She had promised herself she would only watch, only observe, only breathe the same air as her daughter for one evening. But 25 years of grief rose up in her chest, and before she could stop it, a sob escaped her throat. Brittany turned at the sound. Their eyes met. Natalie's face was wet with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. For a moment, Brittany simply stared. Here was a woman she had just insulted, a stranger in a servant's uniform, crying at the mention of Margaret Hamilton. It made no sense. Then Brittany's expression hardened into something worse than anger, contempt. "Why are you crying?" Brittany demanded, stepping closer. "I was talking about my mother. This has nothing to do with you." Natalie opened her mouth to apologize, to make an excuse to retreat. But the words wouldn't come. She could only look at her daughter's face so close now, close enough to touch and see the ghost of the baby she had held for 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Brittany's friends gathered behind her, watching the confrontation with amused interest. Other guests began to turn, sensing drama unfolding. "Well," Brittany pressed, "what's your problem? Why are you staring at me like that?" Natalie should have walked away. She should have apologized and disappeared and let her daughter live the life that had been constructed for her, the life without Natalie in it. But something in Brittany's voice, the casual cruelty, the absolute certainty that Natalie was nothing, no one less than human, broke something inside the older woman. Before she could stop herself, Natalie whispered, "You have her eyes?" Brittany frowned. "What?" "Your grandmother," Natalie said, her voice barely audible. "You have her eyes. She died before you were born, but I always hoped you would have her eyes." The words made no sense to Brittany. This stranger knew nothing about her family, nothing about her grandmother, nothing about her. And yet something in the woman's gaze, something deep and sad and familiar, made Brittany's stomach tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. She pushed the feeling down. She had been pushing such feelings down her entire life. "You're insane," Brittany said coldly. "Get away from me before I have security remove you." Natalie lowered her head and stepped back, disappearing into the crowd of servers and staff, becoming invisible once more. But as she walked away, her hand rose unconsciously to touch the silver chain around her neck and the pendant hidden beneath her uniform. A small silver charm engraved with a single letter. B for Bella, the name she had given her daughter before they changed it to Brittany. 30 minutes passed, but Brittany could not shake the encounter from her mind. She laughed with her friends, posed for more photographs, accepted birthday wishes from guests she barely knew. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the strange woman with tears on her face, the one who had spoken about her grandmother's eyes as if she had known her. It was nonsense. The woman was clearly unstable, perhaps hoping to create a scene for attention or money. Brittany had seen such people before, the desperate ones who hovered at the edges of wealth, looking for any opportunity to attach themselves to something greater than their own small lives. She spotted the woman again near the champagne station, collecting empty glasses with trembling hands. Something about her presence felt like an intrusion, a stain on the perfect evening Brittany had planned for months. Brittany crossed the room with purpose, her friends trailing behind her like a loyal entourage. "You're still here," Brittany said, stopping directly in front of Natalie. "I thought I made myself clear earlier." Natalie kept her eyes down, her voice soft. "I'm just doing my job, miss." "Your job is to be invisible," Brittany replied, "and you're failing at it." She reached out and took the tray from Natalie's hands, examining it as if searching for flaws. Then, with a motion that appeared almost accidental, she tipped her glass of red wine forward. The liquid splashed across Natalie's white shirt, spreading like a wound across her chest. Gasps rippled through the nearby guests. A few laughed nervously. Most simply watched their faces, showing the careful blankness of people who had learned never to interfere with the powerful. Brittany's voice rang out across the room, loud enough for dozens to hear. "Look at this mess. You can't even hold a tray properly." Natalie stood motionless, wine dripping down her uniform, staining the fabric dark red. She did not wipe it away. She did not move. "People like you," Brittany continued her words, sharp and precise, "were born without the right to dream. You think you can walk into a place like this and belong? Look at yourself. This is why you'll spend your whole life serving people like me." The crowd around them grew larger. Phones appeared in hands, recording the confrontation. No one stepped forward to help the older woman. No one spoke in her defense. A security guard approached, positioning himself beside Brittany. "Should I remove her, Miss Hamilton?" Brittany waved her hand dismissively. "Get her out of my sight. She's ruining my birthday." The guard gripped Natalie's arm, not gently. The event manager rushed over, apologizing profusely to Brittany, promising that the woman would be dealt with immediately. Natalie allowed herself to be pulled toward the exit. Her eyes remained fixed on Brittany's face, memorizing every detail, every line, every trace of the baby she had once held against her chest. Then, as she reached the edge of the ballroom, Natalie stopped walking. The security guard tugged at her arm. "Keep moving." But Natalie planted her feet and turned back toward her daughter. 25 years of silence pressed against her throat, demanding release. She had promised herself she would only watch tonight. She had sworn she would not speak the truth that could destroy everything. But watching her daughter pour wine on her chest, hearing her daughter call her worthless, seeing her daughter smile at her humiliation, something inside Natalie finally broke. "You have a birthmark," Natalie said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Shaped like a teardrop, behind your right ear." Brittany froze. The crowd fell silent, phones still recording eyes darting between the two women. Natalie continued, her voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. "When you were born, I named you Bella. It means beautiful. I held you for 4 minutes and 23 seconds before they took you away from me. I counted every second because I knew I might never hold you again." The silence stretched into something unbearable. Then someone in the crowd laughed a sharp bark of disbelief. "Is this a joke?" a man in a tuxedo called out. "Is this performance art?" Others joined in their laughter, spreading like fire through dry grass. The tension broke into mockery. A woman near the front applauded sarcastically. Someone shouted that the catering company should screen their employees for mental illness. Brittany's face flushed red, though, whether from anger or something else she couldn't tell. She stepped forward, her voice loud and defensive. "Do you people see this? This woman is insane." She gestured at herself, at her light skin, her straightened hair, her designer gown. "Look at me. I'm white. My family has been white for generations. My mother was Margaret Hamilton, a white woman who died of cancer when I was 2 years old." She pointed at Natalie, her finger trembling with rage. "And you expect anyone to believe that this woman, this poor, desperate black woman, is my mother? What kind of scam is this?" Natalie did not flinch at the words. She simply looked at her daughter with an expression of infinite sadness. "Have you never wondered," Natalie said softly, "why your skin is darker than your father's? Why your hair curls no matter how many times you straighten it? Why you feel different from everyone in your family even though you can't explain why?" The laughter in the room faded. People exchanged glances, their amusement giving way to discomfort. The questions Natalie asked were the same questions that Brittany had buried deep inside herself for as long as she could remember. Brittany's hands clenched into fists. "Stop talking. Stop talking right now." "I'm not here for money," Natalie continued. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I just wanted to see you, one more time, close enough to remember what it felt like to hold you." "Liar!" Brittany screamed, her composure finally shattering. "You're a liar and a fraud. You saw a rich family and invented this ridiculous story to extort us." She spun toward the security guard. "Call the police. I want her arrested for harassment, for fraud, for whatever charges will stick." The guard nodded and reached for his radio. Brittany then turned toward the crowd, searching frantically until she found her father standing near the back of the room. Richard Hamilton had not moved throughout the entire confrontation. He stood perfectly still, champagne glass in hand, his face a mask of careful neutrality. "Dad!" Brittany called out, her voice cracking. Tell them she's lying." Every eye in the room turned to Richard Hamilton, the patriarch of the family, the man whose word could end this spectacle with a single sentence. Richard walked slowly through the parting crowd, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He stopped a few feet from Natalie, looking at her for the first time in 25 years. Natalie met his gaze without fear. There was no hatred in her eyes, no anger, only a deep, ancient sorrow that had carved itself into every line of her face. Richard opened his mouth to speak, The crowd leaned in, waiting for his denial, his outrage, his definitive rejection of this impossible claim. But the words that came out were not the words anyone expected. "Brittany," he said quietly, "we should discuss this privately." The room erupted in whispers. Brittany stared at her father as if he had just spoken in a foreign language. "What?" she breathed. "Dad, just tell them she's crazy. Tell them none of this is true." Richard's jaw tightened. "This isn't the place for this conversation." "It's a yes or no question." Brittany's voice rose to a shriek. "Is she my mother or not?" Richard Hamilton, the man who had built an empire on his ability to control any room, any negotiation, any outcome, that man looked away from his daughter's eyes. "The party is over," he announced to the room. "Everyone please leave, now." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, and guests began moving toward the exits immediately. But they moved slowly, reluctantly, phones still recording, eyes still fixed on the family drama unfolding before them. Brittany grabbed her father's arm. "Why won't you answer me? Why won't you just say she's lying?" Richard pulled his arm free. "Because I don't discuss family matters in public." His non-answer was answer enough. The whispers in the room grew louder. Brittany could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet, everything she had believed about herself crumbling into uncertainty. Natalie spoke again, her voice gentle, despite everything. "Your mother, the woman you call Margaret, she never existed, Bella. She was a story they created to explain where you came from, a convenient fiction to protect the family name." "Don't call me that," Brittany whispered. "My name is Brittany." "Your name is whatever they decided to call you," Natalie replied. "But I named you first, before anyone else, before they took you away and pretended I never existed." The police arrived, then two officers pushing through the crowd of departing guests. The security guard pointed at Natalie, explaining that she had been harassing the family, making false claims, disrupting a private event. One officer approached Natalie with handcuffs. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Natalie did not resist. She extended her wrists calmly, allowing the cold metal to close around them. As they led her toward the door, she turned back one last time to look at Brittany. "I don't need you to believe me tonight," Natalie said. "I just needed you to hear the truth. What you do with it is your choice." Brittany watched them take her mother away, her body rigid with shock and denial. The word mother felt foreign in her mind, impossible, like a mathematical equation that refused to balance. She was Brittany Hamilton, daughter of Richard and Margaret Hamilton, white, wealthy, privileged. These were facts, immutable truths that formed the foundation of her identity. And yet, her hand rose unconsciously toward her ear fingers, brushing against the smooth skin behind it. The birthmark she had never thought about, the small teardrop shape she had been born with. "Don't," Richard said sharply, watching her movement. "Don't let her get into your head. She's disturbed." She saw an opportunity and she took it. Brittany's hand dropped to her side. "Then why didn't you say that? Why didn't you just tell everyone she was lying?" Richard's expression flickered, something dark passing behind his eyes. "Because engaging with delusion only gives it power. The best response is silence." "Silence," Brittany repeated. "Is that what you've been doing for 25 years, staying silent?" Her father's face hardened. "You have everything. A name, a fortune, a future. Isn't that enough? Does it matter where you came from?" The question hung in the air between them, unanswered and unanswerable. Outside, Natalie was placed in the back of a police car. Through the window, she could see the Hamilton mansion growing smaller as they drove away. The lights still blazed from every window, but the celebration inside had ended. She thought about the hospital room 25 years ago, Richard Hamilton standing over her bed with lawyers and documents. The choice that was never really a choice: sign away her rights, or lose everything, including any chance of ever seeing her daughter again. She had been young then, and poor, and alone. A black woman who had made the mistake of falling in love with a white billionaire who had promised her the world and then decided she was an inconvenience to be erased. Natalie had signed the papers. She had taken the money that was supposed to buy her silence forever, and she had spent every day since then regretting it. The police car turned onto the main road, carrying Natalie away from the daughter who didn't believe her, the daughter who had poured wine on her chest and called her worthless, the daughter she loved more than her own life. Behind her, in the half-empty ballroom of the Hamilton estate, Brittany stood alone among overturned champagne glasses and abandoned plates. Her friends had left. Her father had retreated to his study. The staff was quietly cleaning up the wreckage of her birthday party. She walked to the nearest bathroom and locked the door behind her. In the mirror, she stared at her own reflection, the olive skin, the dark eyes, the hair that curled at her temples, despite hours of straightening. Slowly, she lifted her hair away from her right ear. There, in the soft skin behind the curve of her earlobe, was a small birthmark, shaped exactly like a teardrop. Eleanor Wright had witnessed the entire confrontation from across the ballroom. She had watched the young heiress pour wine on the older woman, had heard the cruel words, had seen the tears and the accusations, and the police leading Natalie away in handcuffs. Throughout it all, one detail consumed her thoughts: the silver necklace. When Natalie was being escorted out, her collar had shifted, revealing the pendant she wore beneath her uniform, a small silver charm with a single letter engraved on its surface. Eleanor had only glimpsed it for a moment, but that moment was enough. She knew that necklace. She had seen it before 25 years ago, on a night she had never been able to forget. Eleanor had delivered thousands of babies during her career, most of them blurred together in her memory, indistinguishable faces and cries and exhausted mothers. But certain deliveries stayed with her. Certain nights refused to fade. 25 years ago, she had been working the late shift at a private hospital when a young black woman was brought in already in labor. The woman wore a silver necklace with a bee pendant, and she clutched it throughout her contractions as if it were a lifeline. The delivery had been difficult but successful. A healthy baby girl with a small birthmark behind her right ear. Eleanor remembered the joy on the mother's face, the way she had whispered a name to the infant before anyone else could speak, the fierce love in her eyes as she held her daughter for the first time. Then Richard Hamilton had arrived with lawyers and security guards. Papers were signed, the mother was sedated, the baby was taken away. Eleanor had been given documents to sign as well, confidentiality agreements with enough zeros attached to ensure her silence. She had signed. She had taken the money. She had told herself it was not her business, that wealthy families had their own ways of handling things, that the mother had agreed to the arrangement. But she had never forgotten that silver necklace, or the sound of a mother screaming as her child was carried away. Now standing in the ruins of Brittany Hamilton's birthday party, Eleanor made a decision. She walked through the scattered guests toward Richard Hamilton, who stood near the entrance, watching the police cars drive away. "Richard," she said quietly, positioning herself so that no one else could hear. "We need to talk." Richard turned to her, his expression guarded. "Dr. Wright, I didn't realize you were still here." "I remember that night," Eleanor continued, keeping her voice low. "I remember the delivery. I remember the necklace that woman was wearing, the same necklace I just saw around her neck. I remember the papers you made me sign." Richard's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about. I signed your confidentiality agreement 25 years ago, and I've kept my silence all this time. But I never agreed to forget what I saw." Eleanor met his eyes without flinching. "Your daughter deserves to know the truth. 25 years is long enough." Richard grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "You have no proof of anything. It would be your word against mine, and we both know whose word carries more weight in this world." Eleanor pulled her arm free. "I'm not here to threaten you, Richard. I'm not looking for money or leverage. I'm here because I've carried this guilt for a quarter century and I'm tired of it." She turned and began walking toward the door, then stopped. "Whatever you decide to tell Brittany is your choice, but the truth has a way of surfacing eventually. It always does." She left without looking back. Richard stood alone in the empty ballroom, surrounded by the debris of his daughter's ruined birthday. His carefully constructed world was cracking at the seams, and he could feel the pressure building behind every lie he had told. At the police station, Natalie sat in an interrogation room, her wrists free of handcuffs now, but her heart still heavy. A detective had asked her questions for an hour, trying to understand her connection to the Hamilton family, her motives for disrupting the gala, her basis for the claims she had made. Natalie answered everything honestly. She told them about her relationship with Richard Hamilton 25 years ago when she had worked as a housekeeper in his mansion. She told them about the pregnancy, the birth, the documents she had been forced to sign. She told them about the money that was supposed to buy her silence forever. She had no physical proof. The documents she had signed included provisions that stripped her of any evidence. But she told the truth anyway because after 25 years of silence, the truth was all she had left. The detective listened with a skeptical expression. When Natalie finished speaking, he left the room and made a phone call. 30 minutes later, he returned with unexpected news. "You're free to go," he said, opening the door to the interrogation room. "The Hamilton family has declined to press charges. They're calling it a misunderstanding." Natalie understood immediately. Pressing charges would mean a trial. A trial would mean discovery. Discovery would mean the truth coming out in ways that Richard Hamilton could not control. It was easier to let her go. Natalie walked out of the police station into the cool night air. No apology, no vindication, no acknowledgement of the 25 years she had lost. Just freedom to return to her small apartment and her quiet life as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. For the first time in 25 years, her daughter had heard the truth. What Brittany chose to do with that truth was beyond Natalie's control. At the Hamilton mansion, Brittany had locked herself in her childhood bedroom. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall covered with photographs of herself growing up, birthday parties and graduations and family vacations. In every picture, she stood beside Richard Hamilton, the only parent she had ever known. There were no pictures of Margaret Hamilton. Brittany had asked about this once when she was 12 years old. Her father had explained that it was too painful to keep photographs of his deceased wife on display. The memories were better kept in his heart. She had believed him. She had believed everything he told her. Now she didn't know what to believe. A knock came at her door. Richard's voice followed it. "Brittany, we need to talk." She didn't answer. She couldn't face him yet. Couldn't look into his eyes and see the man she had trusted her entire life, while wondering if every word he had ever spoken was a lie. "I know you're confused," Richard continued through the door. "I know tonight was difficult, but everything I've done has been to protect you, to give you the best possible life. Doesn't that count for something?" Brittany finally spoke, her voice hollow. Was she telling the truth? Silence from the other side of the door. "Dad, was that woman my mother?" More silence. Then footsteps retreating down the hallway. His refusal to answer was answer enough. Brittany sat alone in the darkness of her room, feeling the foundations of her identity crumbling beneath her. She was Brittany Hamilton, daughter of a billionaire heir to an empire. But she was also someone else, someone whose name had been changed, whose history had been erased, whose mother had been paid to disappear. She thought about the woman at the gala, the tears on her face when Brittany mentioned Margaret, the steadiness in her voice when she spoke about holding her baby for 4 minutes and 23 seconds, the love in her eyes even as Brittany poured wine on her chest and called her worthless. What kind of mother could look at a daughter who had just humiliated her and still show nothing but love? Brittany reached for her phone. Her fingers moved before her mind could stop them searching for DNA testing services companies that promised results within 72 hours. She ordered a kit for overnight delivery, providing a credit card number and shipping address with mechanical precision. She remembered a champagne glass that Natalie had collected during the gala one that Brittany had watched her pick up from the VIP table. It was still sitting in the kitchen unwashed, waiting with the rest of the party debris. It would have Natalie's fingerprints on it. Her DNA. Brittany walked downstairs in the dark past her father's study where light still glowed beneath the door past the ballroom where cleaning staff worked in silence. She found the glass exactly where she expected it, marked with a faint lipstick stain on the rim. She took it back to her room and waited for morning. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at the Hamilton mansion. Brittany intercepted the mail before anyone else could see it. She brought the envelope to her room, locked the door, and sat on her bed with the sealed results in her hands. The answer to everything was inside this envelope. The truth about who she was, where she came from, what had been done to her before she was old enough to remember. She didn't open it. Instead, she sat holding the envelope as the sun moved across the sky, as morning became afternoon, became evening. She thought about Natalie somewhere out there in the city, probably back at whatever job she had taken just to be close to her daughter for one night. She thought about her father who had built an entire fiction to erase the woman who gave birth to her. She thought about the birthmark behind her ear, the one she had never paid attention to until a stranger described it perfectly. At the bus station across town, Natalie sat on a bench with a small bag beside her. She had no reason to stay in this city anymore. She had come to see her daughter, and she had seen her. She had spoken the truth, and the truth had been rejected. There was nothing left for her here. A bus pulled up its destination sign glowing in the darkness. Natalie picked up her bag and stood. Before she could board, her phone buzzed with a notification. She almost ignored it, but something made her check the screen. It was an alert from a social media account she had created years ago, one that tracked any public mention of Brittany Hamilton. A new post had appeared uploaded just minutes ago from Brittany's official account. Natalie opened the link with trembling fingers. The post was simple, just a photograph of an unopened envelope lying on a bed and a caption beneath it. Some truths change everything. I'm not sure I'm ready. The comments were already flooding in, hundreds of people asking what she meant, what was in the envelope, what was happening. Brittany had not responded to any of them, but Natalie understood. Her daughter had the DNA results. Her daughter was holding the proof of everything Natalie had claimed. And her daughter, for the first time in her life, was questioning who she really was. Natalie put her phone away and looked at the bus, its doors still open, the driver waiting impatiently. She could leave now. She could disappear back into her quiet life and let Brittany figure out the rest on her own. Or she could stay. Natalie stepped away from the bus. The doors closed behind her and the vehicle pulled away into the night. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if Brittany would ever accept her or forgive her or even speak to her again. But for the first time in 25 years, there was a chance. A small, fragile possibility that the daughter she had lost might find her way back. Natalie sat back down on the bench and watched the bus disappear into the distance. She would wait. She had waited 25 years already. She could wait a little longer. Back at the Hamilton mansion, Brittany finally rose from her bed. She walked to the bathroom and stood before the mirror looking at her reflection the way she had never allowed herself to look before. The olive skin that never matched her father's pale complexion. The dark curly hair she had spent her entire life straightening. The features that belonged to someone else, someone whose face she had seen for the first time at a birthday party that now felt like a lifetime ago. She lifted the unopened envelope and held it against her chest. Then she walked out of her room down the hallway toward her father's study. The door was closed, but she could see light underneath it. He was inside, probably working late, probably pretending that everything was normal. Brittany raised her hand to knock, then stopped. She stood there for a long moment, envelope pressed to her heart, the truth waiting inside. When a lie is buried too long, the most terrifying thing is not the moment it surfaces. It is the moment you begin to question who you really are. Natalie waited at that bus station, watching the night grow darker, holding on to hope she had carried for 25 years. And somewhere across town, Brittany stood outside her father's door, an unopened envelope against her chest, standing at the edge of a truth that would change everything. Would she open it? Would she find the courage to face what she had always suspected, but never dared to believe? That answer waits in part 2. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you were Brittany? Would you open that envelope? And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Part 2 of this story is coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when that envelope finally gets opened. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.